Hello, my name is Tara Kachaturoff, and I'm the founder of Michigan Entrepreneur, where we feature businesses from startup to stellar. Today we have as our special guest Cliff Suttle, who is the founder of Excite Your Audience. Welcome to the show.
Hi Tara, it's good to be here again.
Yeah, or rather, welcome back to the show.
Yes.
We've had you on our show a number of times to talk about different aspects of speaking and entrepreneurship and virtually all sorts of things, and we're back here again today to talk about something else. But before we get started in our main discussion today, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at Excite Your Audience?
Well, what we do at Excite Your Audience is we teach you exactly how to do that, how to excite your audience. Now, an audience can be one person, an audience can be 10,000. So we teach basically the interpersonal communication skills that you can use one-on-one, one in a small meeting, one in an entire room. And we get way beyond just voiding ahs and ums and looking confident. We get into the actual psychology of how to run an audience and how to actually take advantage of that so you can actually use your voice as a great marketing tool and actually use your voice to create profits and success.
Now, what are some of the kinds of things you do in your business? I know you talked about that, but what do you do? I mean, you're a professional speaker, you travel a lot. Tell us a little bit about what your life is like.
What my life is like?
Right.
What's usually pretty crazy is what my life is like. From day to day.
And it is hard to track you down when we need you.
Well, from day to day, I never quite know what I'm doing, and that actually excites me. Mm-hmm. I actually like doing something different every day. Some days I get up, I'm a motivational speaker. Some days I get up, I'm a business trainer. Some days I get up, I'm a negotiator. I'll actually go in and help companies negotiate contracts with other companies. And some days I go up, just 2 days ago, I was writing a speech for a former gold medal Olympian. So, we write speeches, we help people, we coach people on how to speak, we coach people on how to be successful in meetings. And so from day to day, my life can get a little crazy, but it's all about communication.
And I know you do something, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. You actually work with politicians.
Yes.
And I know we have an election year coming up next year.
Yes.
So what kind of things do you do with them? And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Well, they're starting to catch on now. But
speaking matters.
Yes, for a while, it's the really great speakers were getting elected, mm-hmm. and the really not so great speakers were spending tons and tons of money and losing. I can think of a few years ago we had DeVos, who was running against a incumbent governor of the 48th worst economy in the country. Now you would think that's a slam dunk. He ought to be able to win that in a heartbeat. Not that great a speaker. So the problem becomes, he spent $35 million of his own money and got killed.
My goodness.
By by a person who was the incoming governor. I mean, whether you liked her politics or you didn't, it didn't matter.
Right.
The fact was, she was the incoming governor of the 48th worst economy in the country. That should have been she lost.
She was a fantastic speaker.
But yeah, and every time they would have a debate, he'd drop a couple points because she would go into the debates and kill him every time. And the politicians are starting to realize that there's two parts to being electable. The first one is you have to have a great engine. We live in the Motor City. I'm going to make a car pun here.
Right.
You have to have a great engine. It's got to be a great car. You got to have a great suspension. But no one's going to get in that car for a test ride if it doesn't have a great paint job. Speaking is the paint job. Now, we can't change the car. We're not even trying to change the car. I mean, if your car is terrible, people get into your car and it's a terrible car, no one's going to buy it. But if it's a great car with an awful paint job, no one's even going to get in to start it up and drive it around.
What's interesting to me is, especially you're talking about the politics part of it, is your credibility comes from your ability to convey messages and coming from you directly, not writing it out what you believe in.
Right.
It's speaking and your body language, which is the whole sales piece of politics. And I am amazed at who runs for office and how poorly some of them do it. You'd think that they would have coaches, or if they do, they're terrible. I really don't know. I don't know what it is. They're very not well spoken.
And that's sort of the point. You get these politicians, they're
spending all sorts of money.
$50 million, $100 million, and they can't go out and get, for $30,000, you could walk out and get one of the best speech coaches in the country. You could hire us to follow you around for 6 months. Why they don't have these coaches, or sometimes you look at they do have coaches. I can think of a few politicians who have like 4 or 5 coaches, and I watch them and I'm going, who are their coaches?
Probably friends.
Yeah, because they're making obvious mistakes. Mm-hmm. And basically there's 4 levels to speaking. The first one is getting over the fear, getting confident. Audiences, they're not like dogs, they're not trying to chew you up. Audiences are usually on your side, but they can sense if you're nervous. An audience can sense that in a heartbeat. So you get confident up there, that's the first part. The second part then is to get used to the technicals. No ahs, no ums, knowing how to use your eye contact, knowing where to move on the stage, the technicals. The third thing is content. And I see at this point, a lot of people blow it. Their content's just not good. There's no flow to what they're trying to say. And the last point, which very few speakers get to, is the being part. Is that when you're up there, it's so natural to you that you feel so comfortable on stage that everyone in your audience feels comfortable too. And when you see a speaker of that caliber, and that's probably about 5% of speakers. If you think about it, in school, how many people got an A+? It was 5%. It's probably 5% of speakers actually get to that level where they're so comfortable on stage, they're so comfortable in their own skin that, and all the techniques and everything are so ingrained in them that they do it so easily that you walk out of there and going, I love that person. And you're not sure why.
I think from the political standpoint, I think probably a lot of the things they're saying, they don't believe themselves, and when your message isn't consistent with who you are. Seriously,
Right.
I really think that has a lot for the fact why they're not comfortable in their own skin talking about it, because number one, those words they did not write, that a speechwriter that didn't get into their flow, like you have to get into the flow when you're writing speeches, you have to be that person. And I don't think they believe, or they don't even understand it, because a lot of people that go into politics nowadays, they don't even understand the political process. They don't really understand it. They just want to do it because it's popular and they can make money and get deals after they leave office. It's the intent, I think, behind it. They're not true political. It's about political science standpoint. It's not who they are. It's more like an act, as opposed to, I really want to do this because I truly believe in this. Because you can tell when somebody doesn't believe in what they're saying. Speaking about those debates from before, you could just tell it was off.
Yeah.
You have to believe
they're not there.
You have to be the message, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not something that comes out of your mouth. It's in you before
And
that.
if you go back in presidents, Bush, the second, he actually could do a well-written. If the speech was written for him, he could deliver it pretty well. But he never reached that point of being, where he was just natural on stage. Or if you go to Clinton, he did reach that point. He reached the point where he was comfortable. Maybe not when he was saying, I didn't have sex with that woman, but for most of his speeches, he was comfortable. He was so natural and into himself that when he gets up there to do a speech, you feel that. Reagan had the same thing. He was natural. Bush the first, no, he never got to that point. He was a good technician, but he never got to that point. And it's a matter of creating the product. If you don't create the product, if you were a florist, you ran a florist company, you wouldn't go, well, my flowers are a little wilted and they don't have very good color, but here they are. You're not going to do that as a florist. You're going to try to create the greatest flowers as you can.
I think people need to start a little bit earlier in the political process and getting the right tools in place, because you know what? It's nauseating every time it comes around, and to have to listen to really poor speaking, especially when you do it for a living.
Right.
And we know each other from a long time in speaking, starting at Toastmasters, where we actually met eons ago, maybe a decade ago. I don't even know. It's been so long.
Got to be close to that.
Yeah, probably a decade ago. And it's you need to know how to speak.
Yes.
You need to know.
Especially as a politician. It's probably the number one skill.
They need to start now. Start early. Well, today we actually invited you on the show to talk about the topic of how to use speaking to grow your business. Because I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there, and I know you work with people. I mean, politicians are building their business.
Right.
The people that you work with, write speeches for, they're building their business. Maybe they're professional speakers themselves, and they're going around the country, and you're helping them with the speeches and coaching them and this and that. But people, entrepreneurs, whether they're running a brick and mortar or an online marketing company, they want to get out there and use speaking to reach a different segment of the market. And we're going to talk today a little bit, pulling on your experience of how to grow your business by speaking for not for a living, but as supplemental to marketing.
Supplemental. Yeah, because a lot of people don't want to be professional speakers.
No.
They're running whatever their passion is.
But they know that they're losing a little bit. They don't have that edge that, you know, the guy down the street who owns the carpet store who's speaking around town about, you know, what he does in his business. They don't have that. So what's one of the first things people need to do when they, and this could be somebody who's petrified of speaking, what's the first thing, the first hurdle they need to get over to start this? I mean, they may be thinking in the back of their mind, what's step 2?
Right.
I want to do this, but what's step 2?
Well, basically, I'll talk about the 3 steps. You know, the 3 steps you really need is product, marketing, and delivery. You need a delivery model. You know, how are you going to get that to them?
So what's product?
So the product basically is you have to be entertaining. Today, in today's market, people want to hear speakers who are entertaining. They just do. They don't want you to.
It doesn't mean like doing a comedy routine
No.
like Comedy Central or
But
something.
you know, they don't want to get up there and be bored. Mm-hmm. If you go up there and bore your audience, you're going to get there and bore your audience once, maybe twice, and you will never get booked again. The word will spread. You're terrible, and nobody wants to hear you. So you need to be entertaining, and then you also don't want to sound like a commercial. If you're in a carpet cleaning, you mentioned carpet cleaners, the worst thing you want to do is walk out there and talk about carpet cleaning. Nobody wants to hear it. There's a gazillion carpet cleaners out there, and they don't want to hear about how they should have their carpets cleaned. Now, they might want to hear about how improving the environment of their office increases productivity, because this is something they want. They want productivity in their staff. Well, you know, if you have a cleaner environment, you can go in there. A perfect example of this, and I want to bring up someone who is a speaker. He's from the Detroit area. And he actually was the president of ePrize at one point. So his name is Josh Linkner.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he speaks all over, and he does a speech on creativity. Now, what he does now is he runs an investment group. They, the angel investor kind of thing. And they're always looking for products or companies to invest in. And they want creative products and customers to invest in. Now, he talks on creativity. That's not what he does for a living. But every time he talks, he's able to put enough into his speech about what he does do that he probably gets a lot more people coming to him to pitch him on their companies than maybe another person in his spot. He's entertaining. He's got a great PowerPoint. People like to listen to him talk. He's enjoyable to watch.
And he's got that subtext message.
Right. And his message really doesn't have to do with his company.
Right.
So he's worked on the product. That's step 1. You got to work on the product. And you can't do that alone. You really do need a coach.
Because you can't see your own stuff.
Right. Plus,
You need
why
that
reinvent
reflection.
the wheel? Mm-hmm. You know, there's so many people out there like our company or other companies that know how to do this, that have done this, are good at doing this, that can show you how to do it. We actually have an entire event about how to do subliminal messages in your talks. So we understand, how this is done. We're not selling, but we're selling.
Right.
I actually had a client come in he came in to help us craft his speech for him, for his business speech.
Was he a brick and mortar business?
No, well, yes and no. He was basically a search engine optimization company. And he was trying to teach people how to, make their websites so the search engines can find them. That's what he does. So he doesn't really speak for a living. But he came in to talk to us about it. And he had seen me speak and signed up for a coaching package. And he came in and he said, I loved your speech, but you never sold anything. And I'm inside, I'm just like cracking up because I was pitching him about every 3 minutes, but he didn't notice. About every 3 minutes, I brought up something that, was a product shown, or this happened, or that happened, or I talked about what we do. And I'm even doing it here today. If you come back and watch, out there in the audience, if you come back and watch, you'll be able to see how I'm doing it even now. But it doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem like a sales pitch. And that's what people want to see. So, the first point is to work on the product, to get people, you want to be that speaker that once somebody sees you, you can go out and give a speech. And suddenly you have 4 more speeches lined up from that speech because 4 people saw you and then went, oh, you have to come speak for our organization. You were wonderful. We want it. They're going to do that if they enjoy that. Now, you think they're going to do that if you walk in and talk about carpet cleaning for an hour.
Not unless you're going to give them a big discount.
Right. That's really not going to happen. And, like in the case of Josh Linkner, he might be able to walk in there and talk about angel investing for an hour and still have people come, and want him to speak elsewhere. But speaking on creativity, who doesn't want to hear about how to make their